Good evening, everyone. I'm Vince Boudreau. I'm the president of the City College of New York. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all here to what is the sacred center of this great and storied institution, the Great Hall. This room, in its architecture and its adornment, is an architectural embodiment of the aspirations that we have had for over 100 years for the students that come through this institution. Senator Moynihan for 2 very good years among them. And when I bring people to Shepherd Hall, I like to tell them about the Great Hall, but I'm not going to do that today because there's another bit of architecture in this building that I think deserves some attention tonight. 2 floors below us is a space that currently holds the Charles Rangel Center for Workforce Development and Infrastructure. And we're very, very proud of that. And Congressman Rangel is here. We're honored to have him with us. Congressman ESPAILLAT is next to him, who is one of our great supporters and benefactors for that initiative. And we're glad that he's with us tonight as well. The space that's currently occupied by the Rangel Center, though, in the 1940s and 1950s and 1960s had a different name. We called it the alcoves. And indeed, down there were archways in this long basement. And at those archways were tables set up, and different groups of students had ownership, preliminary, provisional ownership of those tables, and they defined themselves by their beliefs. And so down there you would find the communist table and the socialist table and the Democratic table and a Republican table. And eventually there was a neoconservative table because the neoconservative movement came out of the debates that happened in the alcoves downstairs. And students would leave classes sometimes from the South Campus, south of 135th Street, and they would run to make sure that the tables in their alcoves were never unpeopled, that there was always somebody at a table willing to engage in argument and debate. And in some ways, that spirit of engagement and debate and intellectual excitement among the student body defined what it meant to be a City College student. And in my current job, I spend lots and lots of my time talking to older alumni who say that experience made them tougher, scrappier, more able to deal with people they met when they left City College. In fact, about 3 years ago, we were doing a program at the Jewish Museum downtown, a program about the relationship between City College and Jewish New York. And one of our great graduates, Vivian Gornick, was talking with a panel about their experiences in the classroom, and all of the other panelists were talking about how great their professors were, how wonderful the instruction was. And Vivian kind of shrugged and said, I didn't think my professors were that great. They were okay. But what made us smart was the alcoves, because we fought over everything. In fact, the film, maybe some of you have seen it, about the origins of the neoconservative movement is titled Debating the World. That's what it meant to be here. And so I say that because as a student, Senator Moynihan surely spent time in the alcoves, surely was part of a table, surely defended his positions. And that spirit of open, energetic, impassioned debate is one of the cornerstones of why we thought the Moynihan Center had an important place historically and in the future at City College. Because I know that when Shelby White and the other supporters of this project came to us with the idea of a Moynihan Center, part of that idea was that we have run the risk in the last years of losing our capacity to engage one another in debate. And so even though the Moynihan Center will be established 5 floors up from here in what used to be the Colin Powell Center, its true spirit exists 2 floors below in the alcoves. And what the experience of the alcoves meant for generations of City College students. There's a second element of Senator Moynihan's life that we hope to recapture in this center, which is the ability to use the resources and the intellectual capital of the university in public life. And for too long, the expertise itself has been devalued in our public conversations. And so the ability to knit the expertise of the university with the wise thought about how we should guide and shape our society is another animating feature of this center. And so those two elements, the willingness to engage in debate, so fundamental to this institution, so fundamental to that generation of leaders of which Senator Moynihan was a leader, and the positioning of an institution like City College in the resolution of the most important public problems that we face are united in this center. And so it is a great honor to be able to welcome you to the inauguration of the Moynihan Center at City College. One of my jobs is to acknowledge the public officials that are here today. I've spoken about Congressman Rangel, Congressman ESPAILLAT. Al Taylor, our great assemblyman, is also here. We're honored to have him. We are even now awaiting the arrival of another Moynihan alum. I gather you'll be hearing a lot about the Moynihan alumni over the course of the night, but our governor will be here shortly. Jumaane Williams, our public advocate, is slated to arrive. You can repeat that applause when he comes in the front door. And I want to repeat my great thanks and acknowledgement of Shelby White for her wise philanthropic leadership of this project. And of course, the entire Moynihan family, but most especially Liz Moynihan. We are so honored. We are so honored for your presence here, and will do everything in the power of this institution, it is a powerful institution, to bring honor, more honor, to the name and reputation of your late husband. He meant so much to so many people that are here, and we are honored to be able to inaugurate this center. So thank you for coming tonight. Welcome to City College and the Great Hall. It is now my tremendous honor to introduce my boss, the Chancellor of the City College of New York, Felix Matos Rodriguez. I'm a little unusual at CUNY. I've been at this college for 32 years, and I've done everything from assistant professor through to president. And the only person that makes me not unique is our current chancellor, who's pretty much done the same thing through the years. Professor, center director, community college president, senior college president, and he's got some current job right now. Oh yeah, my boss, the chancellor, Felix Matos Rodriguez. Please welcome him to the podium.
Thank you so much, President Boudreau, for that introduction. And why don't we give a big round of applause to this wonderful leader who's made such a difference here at City College in the many roles that you've played. And we are so happy to have you guiding City College and advancing projects like this Danny Patrick Moynihan Center, which is very much part of, I know, the vision that you had since you've been engaged as a political scientist here in the faculty and in your roles at Colin Powell School and now as president. It is great to be back here at City College. I was with President Boudreau here. We were a lot more casually dressed 2 weeks ago, welcoming the incoming class, the freshmen and the students that were coming to the Towers, which is the dorm here at City College for the beginning of the semester. And it's great to be back when classes begin with all that energy and all that vibrancy that the beginning of classes brings to the City College and to the entire City University of New York. Vincent did the greetings to all our friends who are our elected officials. In Spanish, there's a phrase that says, Me uno al saludo protocolar, which is a way of saying I joined the protocol greetings that he gave to all the elected officials, and that way you're sort of covered. But I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge two great friends, not just of City College, but of the entire City University of New York, Congressman Rangel and my good friend, Congressman ESPAILLAT, that I get the chance to introduce in a second. You can give them a second round of applause. They deserve all that. I know that we'll be joined by alumni of the senator's sort of extended family, political family, the many people that he mentored throughout his wonderful career in public service, the Deputy Secretary of Transportation, Paulie Trottenberg, and MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell, both of whom had the privilege of working as aides to Senator Moynihan and have been so much part of the work here at the center. I welcome my gratitude and my respect also to Liz Moynihan. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I hope that you feel proud about the work that is being done here and the legacy that it keeps of your husband's great work, not just in New York City, but in the entire United States. To the folks that are gonna make things happen at the Moynihan Center, the Dean of the Colin Powell School, my good friend Andy Rich, who's over there, I think getting ready for the governor to arrive and on double duty. The Executive Director of the Center, Professor CARLO ACCETTI. Why don't we give him a big round of applause for his incredible leadership. And I know that later in the program, we're going to acknowledge the many wonderful philanthropic partners that allow us to be able to give life to the programming in the center. I was told that they want to be acknowledged later, so I don't want to be seen disrespectful, but they asked me, let us thank them later. But I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a great friend, not just of this project, of City College, but the entire City University, Shelby White. So thank you, Shelby, for all your support and all that you do. I am delighted to be here and excited and proud to celebrate the legacy of one of New York's most revered U.S. senators with a program that goes to the heart of CUNY's own legacy of opening doors of opportunity to people of all backgrounds and advancing the civic good. It is a wonderful moment for the Colin Powell School, for City College, and for our entire university. Senator Moynihan was an exceedingly erudite man who studied here at City College, at the London School of Economics, and earned his doctorate in history at Tufts University. I'm a historian myself, so I've always been a fan of the senator as we share that common bond of being historians. And as President Boudreau mentioned, he began earning his chops here at City College. And as we have learned from his wife, Liz, he always considered himself a City College man. So the creation of this center reunites him with his original alma mater, and we couldn't be more proud to claim him as one of our own. I also want to congratulate and welcome the 8 inaugural Moynihan Public Scholars, Leaders in Residence, and postdoctoral fellows. You are all an impressive and distinguished group with a wide diversity of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives. I also want to congratulate the 28 members of the inaugural cohort of the Undergraduate Public Service Fellows. I'm excited about this new community within a community that you will all create together and you will all bring to the Powell School and to our university. All of our fellows and the Moynihan Center itself represent an important but often overlooked value of higher education. And it goes to one of the points that President Boudreau was making earlier. Even as we fulfill our primary responsibility to provide students with opportunities for academic achievement and career success, we often talk about that great social mobility that the City University and City College uniquely and with distinction have been performing for generations in New York and in our country, it is also our job in the university to turn out graduates who are well-informed, socially aware, and actively engaged in the world, as President Boudreau said. And as many of you have often heard, the importance of CUNY as bringing social mobility and being part of the American dream machine, I'm also very proud of what I call civic mobility, right? Which goes back to that capacity to be able to understand our democratic institutions, to participate, to be able to be knowledgeable about debates, about issues, to be able to bring the best of policy and information to inform all of that, right? And when you think about that half of our students were not born in the US, a large number of them are second generation in this country, that civic mobility role is an indispensable role that we embrace at the City University of New York, and I could not think of a center that embodies that better than this new Moynihan Center. So kudos to the entire team here at City College for putting it together and helping us to advance that. I also think that especially in these times when our society is so polarized, we need to be purposeful about the efforts that we make and the strategies that we employ to equip our students with the knowledge, the skills, and the experiences they need to impact the lives of others. And we need to promote understanding of public affairs more broadly in our city and our nation. The Moynihan Center is a perfect blend of CUNY's educational and public service missions, and it couldn't come at a better, more auspicious time in our history. I want to thank everyone who's made this possible and everyone who will be part of making it possible in the future. I look forward to celebrating the fruits of your efforts for many, many years to come. So congratulations and thank you for having me here. And now it is a distinct honor of mine to introduce the next speaker, someone who is extremely well known to the community here in City College, but also who has been a long-standing CUNY citizen. He earned his political science degree as an undergraduate as part of CUNY. It was not at City College, so I'm not going to mention the college, not to get into any issues, right? He went to Queens College, right? People have to go to other schools. We need to be able to embrace that. But Congressman ESPAILLAT has been making history as he makes policy, as he does the right thing for the community he's represented, for New York City and for New York State. We all know of his incredible career as a New York State Assembly member, as a New York State Senator, right? And making history as the first Dominican American elected to Congress and the first undocumented individual, right, who also became a member of Congress. Someone who's always fighting for City College, always fighting for the students in CUNY, a great friend of the university, a wonderful New Yorker, and we're so proud to have him in Congress, our great friend, Congressman ADRIANO ESPAILLAT.
Thank you, Chancellor. Not for telling everyone that I went to Queens College, but thank you for your words, and President Boudreau. And you know, when my late father was a working class immigrant, and when I tried to explain to him that I was going to Queens College, and he looked at me and he said, "What are you studying, son?" I said, "Pop, I'm studying political science." And he looked at me and he says, "You're gonna spend all that money to become a communist?" I said, "It's a science, Dad." He goes, "How are you gonna support your family, leading strikes and burning tires?" And sure enough, I met the great Michael Harrington at Queens College, who was a mentor and made me read 2 volumes of Das Kapital. But This is a majestic place, Congressman Rangel. When I was a state senator, we landmarked West End Avenue. You New Yorkers on the crowd probably know West End Avenue. And I went to testify for the landmarking of that avenue from beginning to end. And they asked me, why do you want to landmark this street? It says, it feels like you're walking into a cathedral. And it actually did. It felt like you were looking for the altar somewhere down the line. But this is heaven here. This is a majestic place. This feels like walking into heaven. I remember one time I came and I sat right there next to Charlie Rangel. I was an upstart assembly member, and I came to ask him for support. And the great Charlie Rangel looked at me, Governor, and said, young man, I will be with you for as long as I can. And then I sat next to him, and I told him I never thought that I would, at this early stage, I would be sitting to the right of the Father, right here in heaven. But the great Congressman is still part of this college with the Rangel Center, and now we have the Moynihan Center. Two important, I would say, incubators of thought and action. It's important for this neighborhood and for the city to have both of them. I think there is a great need for public debate and public policy. I think we've forgotten to take the deep dives that are necessary, Secretary, to develop good public policy, which is the backbone of smart projects. And so when you think about, Secretary, the 2nd Avenue subway, right? A $7 billion project for 3 subway stops on the east side of Harlem. A transportation desert that's gonna move over 150,000 people every day and will unclog the busiest, most overcrowded subway line, the Lexington Avenue line, perhaps in the world. That require public policy. That require a deep dive into transportation and neighborhoods, the DNA of neighborhoods in New York City, to understand why this project, Governor, and we're thankful for your help on it, is so important. And when you talk about the Kingsbridge Armory, and the governor just gave $100 million for the Kingsbridge Armory, the biggest armory in the country, right in the middle of the Bronx, right in the zip codes where the COVID-19 pandemic hit the hardest, and perhaps a national project, an international project, because if we could plant the flag in the Bronx and say, after the pandemic, this is what we're doing here, and we're back, it will send an international message to the rest of the world. But that also requires thought and public policy. And so these two centers are joined at the hip. They're twins. And a senator and a congressman of great stature, both of them, are right here in this home of learning. So to me, it's a privilege to be part of it, to be helpful to this college, the president, which has led this college and is looking way ahead of the curve with initiatives that will connect young people to the jobs that will be available today and tomorrow. And so as we work on the 2nd Avenue subway, as we work on the Kingsbridge Armory and the Gateway Tunnel and other major infrastructure projects, it is places like this that will generate and guarantee the workforce that will bring our city to another level. And so I thank you all for your efforts. I know that there are a couple of Moynihan graduates here, Polly Trottenberg, who's our Deputy Secretary, our Deputy Secretary of Transportation, and she did a tremendous job here as the Commissioner of Transportation. We did some bus lines, together, I believe, select bus service. Got clobbered for it by the small business owner, but I won my reelection anyway. And of course, the great journalist, Lawrence O'Donnell, the last word, always has the last word. And thank you both for being here. When I take Amtrak to Washington, I go to the Moynihan station, and I see the grandeur of it and think about him. I never got to serve with the senator. I read about him, and of course, I follow his work closely, but he was a great New Yorker, as is Charlie Rangel, and they make us all proud. And that's why New York City is the center of the universe. It will continue to be the center of the universe. And it will give other young boys that came from a Caribbean country that wanted to play third base for the Yankees the ability to now walk the halls of Congress. And so I thank you for inviting me. Governor, thank you for being here. And we'll continue to support this important center that is emblematic of New York City and New York State. Thank you, and keep the faith.
My name is Mike Miller. I'm the Managing Director of the Moynihan Center. It's really a pleasure to have you all here today. I've got quite an easy job tonight. I just got to bring the stars up on stage, and I get to do that right now. I'm delighted to introduce to you another person who really needs no introduction, someone who's done a great deal for this state, for this city, and happens to have been a former collaborator of Senator Moynihan's. We know she has an extraordinarily busy schedule, and we're grateful that she took out some time in her day to be with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Governor Kathy Hochul to the stage.
Thank you, Michael. I've concluded that preparing a speech about Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan is far less stressful than preparing a speech for him. As a former person who wrote speeches, I see some of the alumni. Oh, I've got a lot of stories. But this is an honor for me. An honor to be in a place as hallowed and as majestic as this, a place that has truly earned the mantle of the Moynihan Center. As I think about the students in this room, I ask myself, and you should be asking yourselves, who is the next Daniel Patrick Moynihan among you? Who will be that leader that transforms a nation in turmoil? Who will be that leader that is a giant among giants? Who is that leader who understands truly the nature of statesmanship? Because I lament the fact that this generation has not seen many visible examples of this in our time. Indeed, they've seen the opposite. They've seen assaults on our democracy, something that would have shocked those who served at a time when I was so blessed to be a staffer back in the 1980s. We didn't know it then. And I preceded Lawrence O'Donnell by just about a year. And you can blame my baby that was born that year because I couldn't keep the long hours while taking care of an infant that were required to be successful. But there are so many people like myself, influenced, inspired by this man, literally generations. There's 3 parts of the Moynihan story, and when he gathered to talk about him, an annual event for his birthday, you get to understand how since the 1970s, this is an individual who, teaming up with his brilliant wife, Liz, the strategist, and some say the brains behind him, and I want to give a special shout out to Liz Moynihan for your role also in changing the course of history, Liz. But in the 1970s, what was I doing? I was this nerdy high school kid who somehow liked politics. I didn't have parents involved. My parents used to live in a trailer park. We didn't know much about politics. But I had a teacher An 8th grade social studies teacher who taught me about government, and we took a field trip and went down there to see our nation's capital. And my dream at age 13 was someday, if I work hard enough, I might be able to be a staffer for a senator someday. That was my entire life's dream. And when Senator Moynihan hired me at the age of 28 as an attorney on his staff, I was done, folks. I had achieved all my dreams. Now, the moral of this story is dream a little bigger. Push yourselves. But that was the start. It was the start of me learning at the hands of the master, someone who'd already established himself, an advisor to presidents, an ambassador known around the world, an academic, a genius, a prolific writer of books that really shook the conscience of America and challenged us to be better. When I came to meet him as a staffer, he was already that legend, and I was so humbled that a kid from Buffalo, New York would be able to work with him. But I wasn't the first Buffalo kid he found. We all honor Tim Russert, an individual who I worked with on Senator Moynihan's first campaign in 1976. Again, that nerdy high school kid, loved politics. Took an hour bus ride by myself downtown Buffalo, put my 50 cents in the driver's hands and said, I'm going to Buffalo, I'm gonna work on a campaign, I'm real important. I was 16 years old. But I helped him get elected in one sense. I don't think our paths crossed often, but I felt I was in the presence of greatness even then. But when he was elected to be a senator, I never dreamed that a few years later, after a few starts doing other things, that I'd actually be able to join him on Capitol Hill. He changed my life in many ways. He reminded me of the power and nobility of public service, the purity of it. When it's done right, it changes policies. You heard the Congressman, ADRIANO ESPAILLAT, and I want to acknowledge him today because this would have been the first time you didn't hit me up for money for the 2nd Avenue subway. You did not disappoint me. You did not disappoint me. I mean, I'm listening. He's looking at me, $7 billion. We can do this, right, Governor? Always a great champion. I thank him. I thank other people who've inspired me. Kelly Rangel. When I was elected to Congress in a race I was not supposed to win, everybody said she can't win in upstate New York. It's all Republican up there. Well, I was from there. I knew how they thought. I knew what was important to them. When I was elected in that unexpected election, I came and Charlie Rangel was the dean. And when he embraced me and told me I'm now part of the family, I just realized I had just been a staffer for Senator Moynihan, and now I'm a member of Congress. I felt the weight of Senator Moynihan on my shoulders because I could not disappoint him, even after he passed. I knew I must carry on like a true disciple of Senator Moynihan, as many of his staffers were and became. So that's what I feel, the weight of responsibility on my shoulders, to live like he did, to challenge the status quo and say, this is not good enough. This is the greatest country in the world. Why aren't we doing better? Why can't we be changing the outcomes in our cities after all these years of pointing out the challenges back decades and decades ago? Are we getting any better? Are we pushing ourselves? Are we becoming that great nation we always had potential to be? You know the questions. Many are still unanswered. But I do know one thing he taught me that I carry today as well. What it's like to collaborate. And he really was a statesman at its finest, but collaboration. What does that look like? Well, when I was working in 1986, we had an immigration problem. People coming across the border. Didn't know where they should go. They were not legal. They couldn't work. Sound familiar? Sure does. Senator Moynihan designated me to work with other Democrats, that's not hard, but to work with Republican staffers, House, Senate, Democrat, Republican. Can you imagine this scenario? And the staffers worked long hours. We ate lots of pizza day after day into dawn. We were working so hard because in the next room, the senators and the congressmen were counting on us to come up with recommendations and to work with them. And because of their relationships and their friendships and their respect for others, it was easy for us to do the same. We got it done. That's the last major immigration reform that this country has seen. We can do better. We can be like that once again. We can solve the most seemingly intractable problems because we have people who've gone before us and done the same. We carry on the weight of their stories and their history. And history will look at us in our time and judge us. Do we measure up to people like Senator Moynihan, those who came before? Or did we fall short, too timid to try, too timid to challenge, too timid to push ourselves? I will choose not to be among those timid souls. Senator Moynihan would be disappointed if I were. But he has had a remarkable life, starting with nothing. When you met him later, you just assumed he came from great wealth and prestige and prominence, because look how he behaved. He used to shine shoes in Hell's Kitchen, to lug around bags of potatoes. And you know what changed his life? This institution changed his life. It gave him a chance to understand what formal education was all like, to push himself, to see other people who want to make themselves better by showing up in a classroom. That changed his life, otherwise he could have been a longshoreman the rest of his life. Nothing wrong with that. My Irish uncles were longshoremen too. But they didn't have a breakout. They didn't have the same DNA, perhaps, that sense of adventure, that willingness to take a chance. So that's what I want to leave you with. Look at the alumni. Look at people like Lawrence O'Donnell, who the nation listens to every single night, or at least the smart ones do, to find out insights and a different way of looking at things. He learned. Polly Trottenberg, she's making a profound difference in our nation's capital. Sorry to lose Polly, but look what she's doing, working with President Biden, bringing billions of dollars of infrastructure money like Senator Moynihan used to do, and bringing it out to communities that have been starved for so long, to have basic services provided, and so many others. To the leadership of this organization, to Felix Montes Rodriguez, our Chancellor, to Mike Miller, to our Dean, I thank all of you, but I'm going to stand here and make a prediction that there are students sitting in this audience that perhaps 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now will be spoken about with the same reverence that we're talking about Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Because when they get this foundation, this education, the inspiration of this name on the walls, there will be no stopping them. And I have confidence that our future is going to be just fine. We're going to make it. Our country has been tested. And I'm not just talking way back to the Civil War. We've been divided before. But to those who say, it's never been as bad as this, we're never going to recover, young people, don't be like that. Have a sense of optimism in your heart and souls. We're counting on you to have that belief. When I was a young kid, we had 1968. Look it up. It was a really rough year. Dr. King was assassinated, and I, as a kid, had written book reports about him. I knew who he was. Bobby Kennedy assassinated, riots for the Democratic Convention. Went to see Washington with my family over Easter break. Washington was on fire. A president resigns in disgrace. Watergate. Kids are killed on a college campus for protesting the war, Kent State. Those are the images that are seared in my mind, as well as our country being divided over the Vietnam War, and I had uncles serving there. If anyone was going to be depressed about the future, it would have been someone who lived those scary years. But never bet against America. We always come back. And it's not just because of the institutions, it's because of the people who fill the seats in those institutions. People like Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Don't forget the power of one individual to affect global change. Change in our country, change in our culture, change in society, and ultimately, hopefully, change in our hearts as we become the country that we always had potential to be. Thank you, my friends. Thank you for the privilege of being able to honor someone who has touched my life. And I'll always be grateful for the experience of having worked with Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor Hochul, Congressman ESPAILLAT, Chancellor MATOS Rodriguez, and President BOUDREAU for your kind words and for your support for the Moynihan Center. And thank you all for being here today. I am CARLO ACCETTI, the Executive Director of the new Moynihan Center at City College. And thank you. I'm also a professor of political science here in the Colin Powell School, and it is an honor for me to be here today and to see the inauguration of a project that has been almost 3 years in the making. What I want to do over the next few minutes is tell you a little bit of the background history of this center, in part as a way of articulating some of the core ideals and goals that animate it, but also as a way of acknowledging and thanking some of the key people and institutions that have helped make it possible. The original idea to create a new academic center dedicated to honoring the legacy of the late senator from New York, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, at City College, came from the Leon Levy Foundation, and in particular from two of its current trustees, both of whom had a close relationship with the senator and whose friendship with each other remains at the heart of the whole endeavor. Elizabeth Moynihan and Shelby White were here tonight, and I want to thank. During the early conversations I had with Liz and Shelby, but also with other members of the Leon Levy Foundation, amongst whom I want to acknowledge in particular Meredith Ross and Robert Goldrich, Liz Moynihan insisted in particular on two things. First, that the purpose of this new academic center should be to forge the next generation of public service leaders in the spirit of her late husband, whom, as you either know or are learning, was an extraordinary figure, of which we sorely need more like today. But second, that this new generation of public service leaders should come from City College. Not just because this was Senator Moynihan's alma mater, but also because today's students at City College are in many ways analogous to Senator Moynihan himself when he first enrolled here in 1943. That is to say, working class kids, often with immigrant or minority backgrounds, but also an ambition to change the face of this nation. The idea for the center was immediately received with great enthusiasm and an incredible amount of support by President Boudreau and all of City College's administration. In this regard, I would especially like to acknowledge and thank the Dean of the Colin Powell School, Professor Andy Rich, for being an invaluable partner with me in shepherding this initiative from the start, and also Professor Dan DeSalvo for all the help and support he gave us, and all the other faculty members and members of the administration who have made this possible. After securing internal administrative support, Dean Rich and I embarked on a mission to develop the core programs of the center by obtaining input from a variety of outside sources. And the first port of call was the existing network of Moynihan alumni and friends, many of whom are here tonight. This put us in touch with an extraordinary network of people, distinguished not only for their own personal achievements, but for their impressive loyalty and gratitude towards the center towards Senator Moynihan, which was reflected in their support and enthusiasm for the center. I cannot possibly mention all of those tonight, but I cannot refrain from mentioning three in particular. Mark Patterson, Ross Frommer, and Dick Ravitch, who, as you may know, passed away over the summer, sadly, but played a critical role in making this possible until the very end. Another important aspect in making all of this possible is, of course, the financial support. In this regard, beyond the Leon Levy Foundation, I would also like to thank the other supporters of the Moynihan Center, which include Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Revson Foundation, the Teagle Foundation, and the Achilles and Bodman Foundation. Within and along these institutions, there are also many individuals who helped to co-create the center with their vision, input, and creative energy. In this regard, I would particularly like to thank Tamara Tweel, Steve Mann, Gara LaMarche, and Julie Sandorf, as well as Leslie Linkowski and Deborah Knopman. The result of all this joint planning and organization and hard work is a new academic center whose core mission will revolve around two complementary fellowship programs. The Moynihan Public Scholars, which is a program for early to mid-career professionals and academics who will spend a period of 1 year here at City College cultivating bold and heterodox ideas in the spirit of the senator, mentoring our students and animating our public events. The other fellowship program, the Moynihan Undergraduate Fellows, is for some of the best and brightest minds here on the campus with an ambition for public service and intellectual leadership. Our hope is that the Moynihans of the future will be forged out of the interaction between these two groups of fellows, as well as the broader ecosystem of leadership development and public discussion that they will help to forge on campus. I end by telling everyone here something I already told all of these fellows separately, that the Moynihan Center at City College aims to be an open platform, integrated within the broader communities of the college, the university, the neighborhood, and the city at large. For this reason, everyone here today, and those who aren't, I want to welcome you into the center. I want to invite you to bring us your ideas and your transformative ambitions. We will do our best to engage with them and to hope to help nurture them in the spirit of open but also frank dialogue, which was a characteristic of Senator Moynihan himself and also of this venerable institution. I end by leaving you to see a short video we have prepared that aims to encapsulate the spirit of this mission in a visual and hopefully more lasting way. Thank you very much for being here.
When people talk to me about you, I always refer him to the Almanac of American Politics, which says he's the nation's best thinker among politicians since Lincoln, and the best politician among thinkers since Jefferson. How's that sound?
That sounds overstated.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan got his start here at City College. He grew up in Hell's Kitchen, working class family, and was working on the docks, and on a whim, because his friend was going to take the exam at City College, decided to go up to Harlem, and according to lore, took the exam with a longshoreman's hook in his back pocket. And that launched a really remarkable career.
One word that's attached to it is flamboyant. The flamboyant.
You predicted the collapse of the Soviet Union long before anyone else did.
They say he's written more books than most of his Senate colleagues have read. And throughout his career, he's been remarkably far-sighted.
What we're trying to do today here at the Moynihan Center is to build and create the Moynihans of the future, the next generation of public service leaders.
When I found out I was accepted, I was so surprised. I was like, wow, okay.
When I saw the email, I was really excited because it was really selective.
Surprisingly, I'm sitting here today and I'm so happy. I couldn't even tell you.
Oh my gosh. Like, the pressure just went off my shoulders. I think because it's so in tune with the career that I want to have, I think it's perfect.
Well, I was thrilled when I got the call that there was going to be a center for Pat Moynihan. I think that the students here will be exposed particularly to Pat's writings, to Pat's history, but the relevant part of it is, how do you mix intellectual vigor with street politics? That's what Pat was able to do that almost no one else was able to do.
Senator Moynihan was a lifelong professor at the highest level at Harvard University. He was a lifelong public servant, again at the highest level in the White House, in the Senate, and he was a great popular communicator. And we hope that the Moynihans of the future will be able to navigate through all of these spheres.
He was always faithful to the facts, even the uncomfortable ones, the liberal programs that he supported that didn't produce the result he was hoping for. It didn't mean failure, it meant, what do we have to do to adjust it?
Pat Moynihan worked for 4 presidents in a span of 15 years, 2 of them Democrats, 2 of them Republicans, and he served them all according to his principles. Really a demonstration that we don't have to be living in partisan bunkers.
The names may be different, the ethnic backgrounds may be different, the genders may be different, but if you go back, I'm gonna get my math right here, 80 years, it's him.
The center will serve students from working class families, from immigrant families, first-gen college students, and having a cohort of public servants who are representative of American society as it exists today in its diversity and complexity and new ideas. This is how nations grow.
Senator Moynihan really used this undergraduate opportunity to go on a whole new career trajectory and essentially change the course of history. It's really important that someone who is in college for the first time, is the first member of their family, to help them see and understand and believe that they too can change the course of history, not just their own personal history, not just the history of their family or the history of their community, but like the history of New York or the United States or beyond. It's an honor and a privilege to help someone along that journey.
That's pretty hard to top. Hi, everyone. I'm back. I've got a few more people I'm going to introduce tonight to speak. But before I do that, I want to introduce or to acknowledge some really extraordinary people who are in this room today. And those are our very first cohorts of Moynihan Fellows. We're a bit tight on time, so I'm not going to be able to give each one of them a proper introduction, but we are honored and privileged to have their names associated with ours. And I'd like to take this opportunity to call those names out as long as we're gathered together here today. So if you know these people, if you know their name, feel free to clap. If you don't know their name, feel free to clap even louder. Leading off are our inaugural Moynihan Public Scholars, who we are just elated to have with us for an entire academic year at City College. Dr. Christina Greer, Daphne Lundy, Dr. Yasha Monk, and Lawrence Pevsner. Also with us this year are the Moynihan Leaders in Residence, including Dr. Saeed Bojwani and Klaus Welle, who will join us in October. The Moynihan Postdoctoral Fellows, Dr. Charles Nathan and Dr. Avery Williams, will be with us for 2 years, in fact. And this is the great fun. At last, but far from least, I'm just beyond proud to welcome the inaugural cohort of Moynihan undergraduate fellows, our public service fellows, and they are Aya Abdallah, Miguel Arias, Zara Aziz, Pamela Bernal Gonzalez, Ayel Cohen, Tenzin Damdul, Lizbeth Diaz, Brianna Domingue, Rosari Estevez, Fadia Faiza, Ruby Farber, Soné Heggie Cornell, Allison Host, Juan Giraldo, Kit Lee, Paris Lovett, Hadika Malek, Clavisa Martini, Devin Merritt, Sage Mochia, Abdullah Moyadeen, Nora Muzahid, Yolani Patterson, Anna Plotnick, Daniel Ritchie, Arifa Sultana, Adriana Arena, and Melissa Vicente. Now, if I just called your name, would you please just stand up for a moment and let everybody take a gander? Folks, this is why we're here today. Everybody in this room understands the critical value of public service and of public-facing scholarship. They know that public institutions like the City College of New York can and must give us the next great generation of public service leaders, and you're looking at the first crop right here. These are the very first Moynihan Fellows that there will be, and there will be many more. So we thank you for choosing us, we congratulate you, and we are chomping at the bit to get started. And with that, I'm really happy to introduce the next speaker in our panel. Folks in this room should be familiar with this person, because I don't think there's any group of people who has more or more strongly formed opinions about public transportation than New Yorkers. And Polly Trottenberg is the Deputy Secretary at the U.S. Department of Transportation and Acting Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration, prior to which she was New York City's own Transportation Commissioner, and we welcome her back. Also of note, she began her career working as a Transportation and Public Works Legislative Aide for Senator Moynihan. So please join me in welcoming Deputy Secretary Polly Trottenberg.
Thank you. Wow, I get to stand on this majestic stage following Governor Hochul, Congressman ESPAILLAT, and then I'll be followed by Lawrence O'Donnell, so no pressure on me. But it is wonderful to be here with such a distinguished group, including Liz Moynihan, the officials here at City College, and so many distinguished Moynihan alumni, and of course, Congressman Rangel. I am just honored to allow the opportunity to share my own recollections of Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. So back in the olden days, in the 1990s, as you heard from the governor, I too had a dream to come work for a member of Congress, and somehow I was miraculously able to sweet talk my way into becoming, as you heard, the Transportation and Public Works Legislative Aide for Senator Moynihan. Here's how I did it. I pitched him on the idea that I was going to help him turn what was then called the Old Farley Post Office into a train station worthy of a great city. Well, we're going to get to that. And going to work for Senator Moynihan, as I think you're going to hear from a lot of people on the stage, it was a dream come true for me as an American history major, as an urban transportation buff, and as someone who'd had a World War II veteran father who rose from poverty in Rochester and was proud of his own intellectual accomplishments, much like Senator Moynihan. And little did I realize how profound the experience of working for Senator Moynihan would be for me, and how much it would translate into my career as a high-ranking official at the U.S. Department of Transportation and as this city's Transportation Commissioner for 7 years. Back when I started with Senator Moynihan, the Farley Post Office project was really mostly just a gleam in his eye. But like so many of his ideas, it eventually came to pass. And some of you who worked for him know Senator Moynihan had a great quote when you met with setbacks. He would always say, "This work is not for the short-winded." And I would say, remember that. It's important in public policy. So I have to say how much I love
dedicating this center to the senator. It is a wonderful tribute to him and, of course, to his beloved wife, Liz Moynihan, his partner in all things. And I think as we've heard, and as many of you in this room know, I could just give the list of everything Senator Moynihan is: thinker, teacher, historian, diplomat, writer, politician, practitioner, grand theorist. He had an ability to see trends and patterns and the bigger picture in so many things, from healthcare costs to the breakup of the Soviet Union. As a staffer, we found him hilarious, erudite, intellectually playful, and truly full of surprises. And as you heard from the governor, I particularly loved his collegiality and his bipartisanship in the Senate. I really learned that as his knee. It was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to learn. He could be a challenging boss. He was opinionated, and he could be demanding, a little persnickety. I think as you heard from the governor, if you were writing a speech or a memo or he asked you a question, you better get it right. I've seen him make grown men cry on occasion, but as we know, getting the chance to learn from him was an incredible opportunity. Just a vignette, every August, the senator collaborated with the Kennedy School to write what was called the Fisk Report, which was a fascinating analysis of the balance of payments between the federal government and all the 50 states. And it would show that states you might expect, like in Alaska or New Mexico, would on balance receive a lot more in federal funds than they paid in. And for the tri-state region, for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, it was the opposite. Every summer, the senator would write an essay to accompany that report. Just one summer when I worked on that report, this was really over the span of about a month, he wrote about the history of the federal gas tax, New York's debt crisis, the great compromise in the design of the US Senate by the founding fathers, the undercount of the US Census, and about 10 other topics. And needless to say, this report was incredibly impactful in some of the debates in Washington. I'll just, an interesting note, the Fisk report sadly really ended when Senator Moynihan retired in 2001. And I think it was one of the signs we'd entered a bit of a different era, an era where elected officials, often had to spend their summers campaigning and fundraising and now having to tweet, and didn't have, I think, the opportunity Senator Moynihan had to sit down in a beautiful little schoolhouse during the month of August and think and write. And what a tremendous benefit it was for the country. As I think you've also heard, Moynihan was also a practitioner. He did help deliver for New York on mass transit funding, on dollars for New York's hospitals, on tax and entitlement policy, and on efforts to reduce poverty and inequality. He understood politics and coalition building to be equally as important as the ideas and the writing. And he did love the city. He loved New York. He loved Buffalo, and he loved a lot of cities around the country. One thing I'll note during my time working for him, I was actually moved by how much he also cared about the city of Washington, a city, frankly, that most members of Congress are kind of indifferent to or perhaps even demonize. He loved cities, and that's what drove him to shepherd through what became one of the most influential pieces of transportation legislation in American history, something that helped shape my career called Ice-T. He helped the US turn away from what had been really often a destructive federal highway policy, tearing through the heart of so many cities. He started the process of steering more dollars to mass transit, as you heard from the Congressman, and really turning the page in American transportation policy, starting to make it smarter and greener and more equitable. And I have to say, his visionary work there, it shaped my career, and I think it shaped the careers of many others. He really did see cities as laboratories and places where we could see progress and make great policy. And I know you're going to get to do that here at City College. As you've heard, another part of Senator Moynihan's legacy was his extraordinary alumni, so many of whom went on to their own distinguished careers, first and foremost our governor, and I know the senator would be proud of her bold leadership. Judges, academics, authors, and journalists, of course, including Lawrence O'Donnell, who teaches me something new every time I watch his show. And these alumni, they deserve their own measure of credit for his success and for spreading his legacy far and wide. And I know for all of us who are in this alumni circle, we look forward to collaborating with all of you at the Moynihan Center for the years to come. I'll end my remarks where my journey with Senator Moynihan started all those years ago, his vision to turn the Farley Post Office into a glorious new train station. The first time I walked through the beautiful Moynihan Train Hall on New Year's Day of 2021, it really did bring tears to my eyes. It was not a project for the short-winded, and few truly profound and transformational things are. So for all the students and the fellows and the scholars, I hope every time you see his name on the center of the wall here, or you stand under the beautiful skylit train hall there, I hope Senator Moynihan will inspire you. And I know he's looking down and he's going to be excited to see the incredible work that all of you are going to do. So thank you so much.
Our final guest of the evening is yet another one who needs no introduction. For many in this room, his is the voice you hear before you shut out the lights for the night. Or if you're like my father, the lights have already been shut out, but the TV is on. He is the host of the aptly named Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. And like a few of our former guests, he got his start working for Daniel Patrick Moynihan as Director of Communications in the Senator's 1988 re-election campaign, then as Senior Advisor, then as Chief of Staff to the Senate Committee on the Environment and Public Works, and finally Chief of Staff of the Senate Finance Committee. By my count, that's 4 tours, and we thank him for his service. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me one last time welcoming Lawrence O'Donnell.
He would be so happy. He would be so happy that Polly Trottenberg used the word hilarious to describe him, because that is the way we of the Moynihan alumni saw him. It is not a common public image of his. One day, a few months into my first tour of service, which was in the Moynihan campaign of 1988, where Liz Moynihan was the campaign manager, delivering 67% of the vote in the state of New York. One day, apropos nothing, as can happen with Liz, she said to me, "You know why I married Pat? You know why I married Pat? Because he's so funny." And at that point, he was still more intimidating to me than he was funny, but 6 months later, I got it. He would be so happy that his dear friend Shelby White helped make all of this happen. He would be so happy that his dear friend, the Dean, is here tonight. As you heard the governor say, Congressman Charlie Rangel was the Dean of the New York congressional delegation, meaning he was the senior member, which made him senior in that sense to the senior senator, Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And when we were struggling in the Senate, after having figured out how to get something through the Senate and wondering how would we ever get this through the House, Chairman Moynihan would say, "Well, let's go see the Dean." And we would go over to Charlie Rangel, and Charlie would begin to solve the problem, and it would all work out in the end as long as the Dean was working on it. He would be so happy that the love of his life, Elizabeth Brennan Moynihan, is here at the inauguration of the Moynihan Center at the City College of New York, the college that opened its doors to that young longshoreman in 1943 who worked as a shoeshine boy in Times Square when he was climbing through the grades of the New York City public schools on his way to graduating from Benjamin Franklin High School in Harlem. If City College had not opened its doors to Pat Moynihan for free, as it was for everyone then Pat Moynihan might have had a long career as a very thoughtful, witty, and wise longshoreman. But City College did welcome Pat Moynihan into higher education, and he soared. I knew none of that Moynihan personal history when Liz Moynihan, our campaign manager, hired me as a sort of press secretary in the 1988 Moynihan re-election campaign, I knew Senator Moynihan had served in the cabinet and sub-cabinet of 4 consecutive presidents, beginning with President John F. Kennedy. I knew he had served as ambassador to India. I knew he had been ambassador to the United Nations. And I knew that in the middle of all of that, he was a tenured Harvard professor. And I stress tenure because Liz Moynihan got him tenure. Liz Moynihan was very disappointed to hear from Pat that Harvard's offer did not include tenure. Then Liz got involved and Professor Moynihan got tenure. Pat Moynihan's bow tie and professorial manner and tweedy look gave many of us the impression that he came from a long line of senators and Harvard professors. No, his mother was a bartender in Hell's Kitchen when her boy was shining shoes in Times Square. I had actually thought that Daniel Patrick Moynihan had a sort of Connecticut gentleman air about him, so when I discovered he was a New York public school kid, I had the only good idea that I had for his 1988 campaign, which was announcing his re-election campaign in front of Benjamin Franklin High School, which still stands so proudly today over there on the East River. Maybe, just maybe, some of the students looking out the window that day at the tall, white-haired man speaking to a small crowd of reporters saw in him how far they could go in this world. When Senator Moynihan was chairman of the Finance Committee and I was the staff director of the committee, we had many Senate confirmation hearings to run at the beginning of the Clinton administration. We had confirmations to run in the Treasury, in Health and Human Services, U.S. Trade Representative's Office, and others. And so there came a day when one of the nominees for an assistant secretary of was making his official visit to the chairman of the committee, which they all had to do at some point. And so it was just the 3 of us in the senator's office. And this was a professor from Harvard who was coming down to be an assistant secretary. And Pat Moynihan, of course, knew the system, which was you could maintain your tenure at Harvard if you left for 2 years. But if you went more than a day over 2 years, you would lose your tenure. So he knew that the assistant secretary sitting before him would be gone in 2 years, and there would be another nominee sitting in front of him. And he very much respected this professor's work and thought he was going to be very valuable to the administration, and they had a great Harvard graduate level seminar discussion for an hour, of which I understood a tiny fraction, at the end of which Senator Moynihan said, well, you know, there's no sense getting involved in any of this if you're not going to be here 30 years. 30 years. Charlie Rangel stayed at it a lot more than 30 years. Kathy Hochul made the 30-year commitment. Polly Trottenberg made the 30-year commitment. There are people in this room who will do the 30 years. Senator Moynihan would hope that this Moynihan Center will help foster that 30-year commitment to public service. Pat Moynihan was always working on a 30-year time horizon and seeing into the future more clearly than most. As you have heard, he predicted the collapse of the Soviet Union decades before it happened, when the CIA was still believing that the Soviet Union would last forever. He worked on the design for Moynihan Train Hall decades before it was built, as you have heard. And he spent those decades working with federal, state, and local officials trying to get it done. He would be so happy with Moynihan Train Hall. It is exactly what he always told us that it could be. For many years, he and Polly were the only ones who could envision it. Even after he got architects to create a detailed scale model of what is there today. In the 1990s, that model was created. Everyone agreed it was beautiful, but no one believed it would ever be built, except him. He knew. And he knew it would take decades. He would be so happy that the highest ranking member of the Moynihan staff alumni is now the governor of the great state of New York, and that she was here at City College for the inauguration of the Moynihan Center. Now, you've heard that phrase, Moynihan alumni, used by me, used by Polly, used by the governor. He would be so happy that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, the phrase Moynihan alumni will mean you and everyone who comes after you through this center. You know, whenever I look up and see the words Moynihan Train Hall on those magnificent walls, I see more than what is written there. I see Liz and Pat Moynihan Train Hall, because there would be nothing named for Pat were it not for Liz. Liz was not just his campaign manager. Liz was not just his campaign manager, she was his career manager. Liz Moynihan did not just get him tenure at Harvard. There would be no Ambassador Moynihan, there would be no Senator Moynihan without Liz Moynihan guiding the way. Whenever you see those words, Moynihan Center, I hope you see the words Liz and Pat.
"30 seconds, folks. I want to just thank a few people who weren't up here on stage, but without whom this doesn't happen. And those are the folks who work for the Moynihan Center. They include Selena Rodriguez, Indrit Kami, Layana Abutuk. I also want to thank my partner, technically my boss and my friend, CARLO INVERNIZZI ACCETTI, Dean Rich, everybody at the Colin Powell School, President BOUDREAU. Maybe it's trite to say that it takes a village to raise a child, but I feel that we're very fortunate to be a part of this village, and I know that it now extends to many of the folks in this room, and watch us grow. Thank you. Please eat, drink, be merry. I would like all of the Moynihan Fellows to come up on stage and to get a picture before we adjourn, but everybody else should feel encouraged to go get a drink and speak with each other.